Good morning and welcome to Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge at riversedgepgh.com. I'm Alan Saunders, filling in for Matt Geica. It is a dreary Friday morning, February 23rd. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on Facebook. We've got a lot to talk about today. It's been a big news week in sports. It's a big news time of the year for sports, right? We've got a lot going on. Spring training. Pirates will have their first spring training game this afternoon. It is approaching trade deadline season in the hockey world. And college basketball is nearing the end of its season. March Madness just a few weeks away. And some big news in the world of college basketball, on a story that's continued to make news all year, came out this morning, and that's what we're going to hit first because, if it's a dreary, kind of miserable day outside, waking up this morning to the news from Peter Thamel and Pat Forty of Yahoo.com didn't make things any warmer and fuzzier if you're a college basketball fan. And I've linked to the story on social media, so if you'd like to give it a read. It's certainly interesting, but essentially what the Yahoo writers have alleged is that as part of this federal investigation into recruiting in college basketball and the bribes and the shoe company money and the involvement of agents, that at least 25 to 30 NCAA violations have been revealed through the books and dealings of an agent named Andy Miller, who's an NBA agent. And you go through it. I mean, there's lists of players and programs, and I mean, it just sort of the highlights, I guess, if you were to kind of check off some boxes. It's Duke, it's Carolina, it's Xavier, it's Utah. It's in addition to the players and coaches that were initially revealed to be part of this investigation. And I don't have any intent on going all the way through this list, and I don't have any intent on lambasting the players or coaches that are involved because, frankly, I think it's even more common than what we're seeing. But to me, the thing that really stands out is that somehow, I guess as part of the discovery process for this ongoing federal investigation, that actual documents have been revealed, and they're republished here on Yahoo, where it breaks down in exact detail what this agency gave to which player, which player's family, which coaches, which teams, what they were owed for those things, which violations were. This was for a dinner, this was for a hotel room, this was for a flight, this was a loan that they didn't pay back, and it's all there in black and white. And I mean, on the first top line takeaway is this is terrible for the NCAA brand of amateurism and for the integrity of the sport of college basketball. I don't know how you're going to watch the March Madness and the Final Four this spring without thinking in the back of your head how many of these guys are cheating. I won't. I'll be thinking it. I think everybody else will be. I think it's a reasonable thought to have right now. I think if I had a favorite college basketball team, I would wonder, are they clean? How well do I know? And if I was an administrator, I would be terrified because how well do you know your coaches? How well do you know your coaches' assistants? How well do you know your coaches' assistants, associates, best friend that's an AAU coach? Because that's all it takes to bring down a top program. We saw it happen in Louisville already. It seems like there's a lot of other top programs that are going to end up in the crosshairs here. But to me, I think maybe after you kind of get past the college basketball is really, really crooked takeaway, is the hubris of this. I mean, they're committing dozens of NCAA violations, jeopardizing the eligibility of all of these players, and in some cases, entire teams, plus the careers of some of these coaches. And it's all in an Excel spreadsheet, in black and white, on somebody's computer hard drive. Now, I understand that agents might not be particularly good criminals, but if you're looking to get away with something that you're doing illegal, just consider this a piece of free advice. Don't make a spreadsheet of it and leave it on your computer. But of course, there was no intention of needing to get away with this. That's to me is the big takeaway here, is that not only did all of this happened and nobody was ever even worried about getting caught. Because you don't make a spreadsheet on your computer of how much it cost to take player XYZ out to dinner last Thursday unless you're sure there's no way you're ever going to get caught for doing that. And that's because the NCAA has no interest in actually investigating this stuff. The NCAA wants to stand up there and blab on and on about student athletes and about amateurism, and they just want to cash the TV checks, and they want to make money selling tickets and jerseys, and they want to pay themselves and their 9 different athletic department titles at every single school in the country that all sit there and make great big salaries. They're all complicit in it because they all need those players to perform for them to make their salary. Every athletic director, every coach, every school administrator, and every person in the NCAA's salary is dependent on these kids performing at a level that interests the American public. That's the only thing that those people have that's marketable, is that they are a part of this scheme that gets people to give money to watch their college do better at another college in sports. And the NCAA never wants to investigate. They never want to find anything wrong because it exposes the grand flaw in the entire scheme, that they have a vested interest in breaking their own rules, and they have a vested interest in not caring when other schools break their rules. And so I don't know what to expect to come of this. To me, this is a smoking. This is the smoking gun. I mean, this is in black and white exactly every violation that's committed. And this is one agent at one agency. God, this is probably not even anywhere near the totality of the violations that have been committed. And this is just recent. This is February and March of 2016. God, imagine if this guy had better books. We'd be finding out that Michael Jordan wasn't eligible in '83. I'm sure this is going on everywhere and has been going on for a long time, and the NCAA just doesn't care. It's against the rules. They have no incentive to find out. They have no incentive to enforce their own rules. In fact, they have a disincentive, right? If you have this year's NCAA tournament and you throw out every team that is listed in this report, nobody's going to watch. Nobody wants to see North Carolina A&T and Lamar in a first-round matchup, or Robert Morris playing Cal Poly, right? That doesn't make for very good television. Nobody's going to pay millions of dollars for the rights to broadcast that on their TV channel, and so I'm very interested to see what's going to happen from this because. Again, the NCAA has no reason to want to investigate these schools. They have no reason to make this a bigger thing than it has to be. And so even though this is a smoking gun, I don't think you're going to see what happened at Louisville happen in North Carolina and Duke. I just don't. I don't believe it. If we see Coach K and Roy Williams unemployed by this summer, I'll be astonished, absolutely astonished. It's just not going to happen because that's not what's good for the people that are involved tangentially in the game of college basketball. The people whose skills are only good at raising money from boosters. You're an associate athletic director. You're a NCAA director of compliance. Look, the big reason the NCAA wants to fight paying players is because if you pay players, there's no need to have an NCAA anymore. All those people can just go away and go find some other job. But you're asking a program to attempt to eliminate itself, and it's never going to happen. And so, yeah, I think this is an extremely, extremely damning report. I think it says a lot of that it was so blatantly recorded that clearly never in a million years did this agent think the NCAA was ever going to investigate him with any sort of teeth whatsoever. It was never going to come up, never in a million years. And it took the FBI getting involved for something to happen. And now I think the NCAA is stuck. because they would have never investigated this on their own. Never. That they would have, and if they did, they'd have found a convenient scapegoat and blamed it all on Louisville because most people thought Rick Pitino was dirty anyway, so fine, just let it go. But this isn't going to go away. And, I mean, I really feel like we are witnessing the beginning of the end for the NCAA's pretend amateurism, and that it's got to go one way or the other. Either the NCAA's amateurism principles need to be modified to adjust to the reality of 2018, or something's got to give on the other end, or they've got to pay players, because I don't see any way that this can continue with the NCAA just, eyes closed, fingers in ears, head in the sand, la 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 la. None of this is happening. Oh, we believe in the amateurism model of student athletes, and it's just crap. It's all crap. It's always been crap, and it's now being exposed as crap. And this goes way beyond basketball. It goes straight to the core of the amateurism model about the amount of money that's in college athletics, and this could provoke real change in college sports, maybe beyond suspending whatever Apples Jones, mother of former Kansas player Josh Jackson, who got $2,700. This is not about $2,700. This is about the fact that this is going on at this agency. This is going on at dozens of other agencies. It's going on at almost every school in the country. And it's time that college basketball and college sports in general started playing in reality, as opposed to in their pretend fairy tale land where everyone's an amateur, everyone's a 4.0 student athlete, everyone cares about getting a degree, and the sports don't matter that much because it's BS, and it has been for a very long time, and it's self-serving BS, and now it's been laid bare for everyone to see how hypocritical that organization is, and I don't know what's going to happen next because I don't believe that this can continue the way it is, as exposed as it's been. The one time that the NCAA will act is when law enforcement or the media, they do the work for them. They do the digging. If you look at every major NCAA scandal where a team has been put on probation, people have been fired, people's eligibility has been taken away, the common thread in all of those is that those organizations, those investigations were started by someone else. They were started by a whistleblower or by a member of the media that latched onto a story and dug deeper, or by law enforcement where somebody committed a crime. Then, and only then, after those things happened and then those stories were publicized, did the NCAA step into action. They don't have any interest in investigating their own, and they don't have any interest in furthering any investigation. I don't know what the scope of the FBI's investigation is, but this report by Yahoo makes it clear that this is deep-seated and runs throughout college sports. And I can't see a future where we go back to pretending that this didn't happen. All right, we're going to let that sour news settle, I suppose, and take a break. We're going to come back with Dan Kingerski from Pittsburgh Hockey Digest, and we're going to talk about something a bit more hopeful, the Penguins' chance of winning a third Stanley Cup and how the upcoming NHL trade deadline may affect their chances. We'll be back in just a minute on Geiks Got Game. I'm Alan Saunders, filling in for Matt Geica. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is David from Pet Clinic, broadcasting from Mr. Small's Theater. You are listening to the River's Edge Radio Network.
Welcome back to Geiks Got Game on the River's Edge at riversedgepgh.com. I'm Alan Saunders, filling in for Matt Geica. It's the second period of Geiks Got Game, but before we get to that, I've got an announcement here. We need to tell your smart speaker, if you've got an Alexa, if you've got Siri, tell them play River's Edge, play the River's Edge station on TuneIn. And of course, if you're already listening on Alexa, you don't. That's irrelevant. But if you're not, the River's Edge station on TuneIn, and that'll come straight into your home, which is a little bit creepy but kind of cool. But you get good local music out of the deal, so I think it's a good exchange. I've actually been I've very much enjoyed today's musical selections. You've hit my musical wheelhouse, if you will.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. We'll try to keep that going.
And next we're going to speak with Dan Kingerski, who's the, I guess, owner, proprietor, grand poobah. I don't know, Dan, do you have a title? He's at Pittsburgh Hockey now, and he's the guy writing about the Penguins over there. Dan, well, first of all, do you have a title? What have you bestowed yourself an official design?
I am the architect.
Architect. It's almost, it's a bit hipsterish. I think it fits though. It's fine. Architect. I like it.
Yeah, I stole that from the Matrix, I guess.
Dan, I was reading your story here at Pittsburgh Hockey Now the other day, and I'm going to link to it on social media. If you're listening and watching, you can read what Dan had to say yesterday about the Penguins' approach at the trade deadline. And I think you and I are kind of in total agreement that center needs to be the priority for the Penguins. It's the position where they have the opportunity to do the most. What do you see there, and what do you see specifically in some of the guys you mentioned as targets?
You could start to maybe end right now with Derek Brassard. He's plan A and plan B. Here's Brassard in Ottawa. Guy Boucher's offensive black hole up there has kind of killed his statistics. So Penguins fans jump to Hockey DB or whatever and see that he has 30 points or 39 points last year. They might say, oh, what are they doing? He's not worth all of this. But if you go back a couple of years when he was with the Rangers, here's a 60-point centerman, which for most teams, Alan, you know it, is a good second-line center. That's what Brassard brings. Feet, hands, a gritty tenacity. He plays, to to channel Mike Sullivan, he plays the game the right way in all three zones and plays on the right side of the puck. He's almost too perfect for the Penguins. So, they're going to make a very hard run at him. I almost keep watching my phone. It could pop at any time now because Brassard's not going to play tomorrow night. By reports, the Senators are just going to let him sit in the press box until they get the deal that they want. After Brassard, it's a real crapshoot. There's Matt Cullen, who's the break glass in case of emergency option for the Penguins. He'd be an upgrade over Carter Rowney. But the giant question is, and even I'm starting to ask it now, is how much gas does he have left in the tank? He's been a healthy scratch in Minnesota. Mark Letestu's name in Edmonton has been floated about, but he's a slow center. I don't know if he's really a big upgrade over Carter Rowney. I kind of wonder that if it'd be worth an asset to get a guy like Letestu. And then you go into no man's land. There really aren't a lot of centers out there, which is what's also driving Brassard's price through the roof.
What about other positions? I know that I guess the Penguins had been sort of connected to Michael Grabner, who was just traded to the New Jersey Devils. I felt like the price paid there wasn't anything that the Penguins couldn't afford, but I feel like maybe Jim Rutherford has, maybe because of the scarcity of available centers, kind of pulled his assets into one pile. Is that kind of the takeaway there, that the Penguins didn't necessarily feel like they could play in both markets at the same time?
Well, they could have made the Grabner deal, clearly, if they had wanted to. But think about this. Brassard will likely cost the Penguins their first-round pick this year. If you go after Grabner, then you're missing your first and second-round pick. So I wonder if a side deal to acquire a high-round selection didn't materialize quickly enough or fell through, and so they just kind of pulled back on Grabner. Also, for as much fun as it would have been to see the Penguins with that ridiculous surplus of speed from Rust and Hagelin at Grabner, and Connor Sherry is not exactly slow, and they already have enough speed, if that makes sense. Grabner would have been extra. So I don't think that they felt the need to remove top of their draft for him.
I think we've been talking about the Penguins acquiring a third-line center since June. But, I mean, why will it be so impactful for them to be able to not just put another talented center on the ice between what have undoubtedly been talented wingers on the third line and make really three scoring lines, but then also bump one of the two players. I mean, I'm not sure it's certainly Riley Sheahan, depending on who comes in, but bump one of those two players down to create a fourth line that is capable of taking a regular turn come playoff time.
Well, I think you just said it there. If you can get four lines rolling, what I don't think people realize is that Sidney Crosby has been double shifting now since mid-December. He hasn't done that with any regularity since 2013-14. He played almost 22 minutes a game that season, and over the last 6 weeks, he's on that pace again. The difference is he was 26 back then. Now he's 30. Those are some hard miles for a 30-year-old to log. So just on that basis alone, another center that will take that pressure off of Crosby is a huge help. But a third-line center with the Penguins had Nick Bonino, and the stats people have been throwing this at me for months, and I dismissed it largely because Bonino's numbers weren't great last year, but the way he played the game, he kept that line moving quickly. There was a little bit of he was dynamic, even if he wasn't always scoring, and he didn't. There was a gritty defensiveness to him, and he kept the puck moving in the offensive zone. I don't necessarily know that Riley Sheahan has that dynamism that Nick Bonino had to his game, and that's why I think Sheahan is better suited for a fourth line role.
Yeah, I mean, I've agreed. I really like Sheahan's game. I liked it from when he was on the Red Wings. I think he could be a third-line center. I just think that the way the Penguins have played, really going back for quite some time now, is that the third line is the reason the Penguins had so much success the last 2 years is that they were undefendable, because unless you had six quality defensemen, you were looking at someone to defend Crosby, someone to defend Malkin, someone to defend Kessel, if that's the way that Mike Sullivan wanted to lay out those three lines. And there just aren't very many teams that have the depth of defense that are able to do that. And it really stresses out an opponent when you're able to put a third scoring line, and not just a third scoring line, but a third scoring line with, I mean, those three guys are all in the top, 20 in the league in scoring? I mean, that's...
top 10.
Yeah, top 10. That's undefendable. But the key to that is that, yes, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are centers, and they can drive the play on their lines. They've proven throughout their careers that as long as the guys beside them can skate, they can be pretty productive. But Kessel is a winger that needs a centerman that can play with him and up to his game. I feel like Sheahan's done some nice things, but I'm not sure he's that guy to make the Penguins a three-deep sort of monster in the postseason.
I agree with that. I've certainly taken enough heat for saying it almost since the beginning of Sheahan's term here in Pittsburgh. He's a good center. He does a lot of the little things that you want of a bottom-line center. He plays well in the corners, and he wins face-offs, and he can kill penalties. Those are all good things, but does he propel the offense? And the answer, the eye test, is not really. You know, he's had some spurts here lately. I'm starting to wonder if he has more than I've seen. So I can't say it's a definitive no. He's actually beginning to make me watch closely. But to this point, though, he hasn't proven that he can drive offense. He's been more of a recipient of it.
And then the other thing that adding a center to me does is it gives Mike Sullivan some options for the fourth line, because Carter Rowney can be a player on the wing that can kill penalties, that can back check. He's a right-handed shot, so if you need him to go take a face-off from the right side, he can do that. And he can still be a valuable piece of the team, even if he's not in that fourth-line center role. And so then that gives Mike Sullivan the option to take a look at his opponent in the postseason and say, do we need a Ryan Reeves? Do we need a Tom Kuhnhackl? Do we need a Carter Rowney? Which of those parts makes the most sense? And kind of go from there. Do you see his? I mean, I think you've been a guy that's seen value in Rowney even when he's not scoring. Are you kind of on the same wavelength with me there?
I'm sorry?
Is that you kind of see that in Rowney, his ability to be valuable without scoring and just be a different kind of part as a winger on the fourth line that could be a lot more useful than he is as a center?
Yeah, I like Rowney. I'm not going to champion him. I think you're correct that Rowney moved to the wing on the fourth line or the press box is about where he fits. He's a 13th forward kind of guy, pending the matchup. If the Penguins were to draw, say, the New Jersey Devils or Carolina Hurricanes in the first round, you'd have not much need for Ryan Reeves. You would have the need for a penalty killer like Rowney. So, yeah, if that third line center, that's just another domino that would fall as everybody kind of falls back to their natural position. Whereas right now everyone's kind of playing a step above their natural. A real third line center who would allow one to fit into their role.
What about other acquisitions? Have you heard anything about, depth defense is generally valued at this time of year? And also, are the Penguins going to have to part with any significant pieces of the current roster to make it a deal for Brassard happen?
Yes, they will. I don't know if Ottawa wants Sprong or Gensel, but I can't imagine a Brassard deal at this point going down without one of those two guys going. I know fans want to ship off Connor Sherry, but for Brassard, you're going to have to pay the real price. You're going to have to pay a premium. I'm not sure which one of those guys would be it, but yes, that's a real possibility. You may also have to see a defenseman be moved, Alan, because the Penguins have a lot of salary tied up in their blue line. As I wrote back in July, or I guess August, when Dumoulin got his deal, the Penguins had one of the two most expensive blue lines in the NHL. They're playing so much better with Jamie Alexiak back there. He really has added a lot and changed the face of that unit. But if you have to sacrifice a Brian Dumoulin, perhaps an Oli Mata, and crack the whip on Matt Hunwick and say, okay, we need you, and do whatever's necessary to get him up to speed, because he certainly didn't play well in his first 40-odd games. But he's a good defenseman, so that gamble might be worth it for the Penguins.
What's your just sense of a prediction, I guess? What do you think is going to happen? Will the Penguins land Brassard?
I think so. If Jim Rutherford has circled him, and if Jim Rutherford thinks that a Brassard deal means a Stanley Cup, they'll get him. Rutherford doesn't lose too many. He's good like that. If they don't get Brassard, I think you'll see a very minor deal, something that comes out of left field. They've been working. I continue to think Calgary might play a role in this whole thing before it's done, either helping Penguins to that big deal or helping them with a guy like Sam Bennett, who could come in and play left wing, perhaps beside Sidney Crosby, or even center a fourth line, or be given a chance to center a fourth line. That's kind of what I see. But that's more speculation than it is knowledge.
Well, you can read, I guess, more about Dan's knowledge and speculation at, probably less speculation, more knowledge at PittsburghHockeyNow.com. He is the architect of that website, and along with the the show whose owner I am squatting upon at the moment, Matt Geica. Matt's going to join us next, but Dan, thanks for coming on. We appreciate talking to you. Again, you can check him out on social media at the Dan Kingerski. Bud Moonshine is dead, or at least hiding. I don't know, or hibernation or something. Maybe he's just in an alley somewhere, because that's where Bud Moonshine...
he found himself in a few alleys, yes. Yeah. Bud Moonshine was no stranger to the alley.
The Dan Kingerski on Twitter, guys. At PGH Hockey Now, PittsburghHockeyNow.com. Check him out. Thanks for talking Pens. We'll be back with the third period of Geics Got Game. I'm Alan Saunders. Thanks for listening.
This is Frank Muzuraka, lead singer of The Roof. We have a pretty cool show coming up Saturday, March 3rd at Mr. Small's Theater. $12 at the door, $10 in the link on our band page at The Roof Official on Instagram. Show starts at 7 p.m. and we will be playing with First to Everest, Flip Switch, and Name It Tomorrow.
Welcome back to Geics Got Game on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. I'm Alan Saunders, filling in for Matt Geica and interviewing Matt Geica, I guess, as it were. Matt is on the line with us from Florida, where he's allegedly on vacation, but we pried him away for a few minutes. Matt, what's the weather like down there in Florida? It's about 45, maybe 50, and drizzle up here. I'm assuming you have it better.
We do have it a little bit better, but when we left, my wife and my son and I on Tuesday, it was 70 in Pittsburgh. So I felt a little stupid escaping to Florida at that point. But now with your updated weather, I feel better because it's about 75, 80 degrees. It's hot down here. It's actually record highs in Tampa. I would say there's not a cloud in the sky, but it's Florida, so that would be lying, but it's really rather sunny at the moment.
It doesn't sound like you have it too bad. How's the little guy on the trip? How's that working out so far?
Oh, he did really well. He loved the plane, and we sat in the back. We flew Southwest, so we had the chance to pick our seats. We went in the back so we could pick him up, maybe take him out into the the flight attendant area if he started to get cranky, but he really didn't. Love that. All kinds of things to explore. We were out at the pool yesterday at the hotel, and we're going to go to the beach at Clearwater if we can get out here. We're already in traffic, so that's a little bit of a Florida piece of it for you as well.
Yeah, Tampa traffic. It's nothing like it. Let me tell you what. It's it's legendary. Well, let's talk some sports, since that's the point of this show. I was just with your cohort at Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Dan Kingerski, talking about the Pens trade deadline. Just wanted to very quickly get your thoughts on that as it relates to, I guess, the current targeting of Derek Brassard and Michael Grabner, I guess, going to the Devils. And I don't know, what else you have on your mind about the Pens and how they look coming into the home stretch here?
Well, first of all, the Grabner move, that was the first one that occurred here in this trade season that I thought the Penguins would be in on, or maybe were at least inquiring. And according to Darren Dreger of TSN, they were in on Grabner. He made sense as even a rental, and I wrote this week that I'd prefer it if I were the Penguins to focus on someone who could help them next year and even 2 years down the line, if at all possible, because that's about as far as the prime of the Penguins superstars will extend. And not that they have to go all in on this year. They have back-to-back Stanley Cups. They don't have to be extremely desperate. But Grabner would have fit in with what they like to do. They do have a glut of wingers, and they have plenty of guys who can move, but Grabner combines speed and a decent finishing touch. So to see the Devils pick him up of all teams, you can really tell where the Rangers' head's at this moment. They went out on social media a couple of weeks ago. You and I talked about that and said they were structuring for the future. Well, to trade a valuable player like Grabner within the division, that tells you exactly how serious they are about getting assets. They don't care about the old conventions. They don't trade within the division. That never really made sense to me anyway. And when you're talking about a rental, it doesn't make any sense at all, personally. But even if there were someone who was going to be there in a year or two, if you're rebuilding and you want to try to change things up, turn things over, then what does it really matter if they're in your division or not, besides the bad optics of it? So that move was interesting to me, and I wonder if the Penguins got the same price tag for Grabner that the Devils did. But elsewhere, for me, Alan, it's about Derek Brassard. I don't know how much you and Dan talked about it, but I know he's on board with Brassard being the missing piece for the Penguins. He almost makes too much sense, and that's the top prize if I'm Jim Rutherford right now.
And I think you kind of hit on the big thing to me that makes Brassard maybe more attractive than others is that he's not a rental and that he's around for another season. And I mean, I just think that it's easy to say, like, oh, you figure things out when you figure things out, but the Penguins have been trying to get a third-line center since June. It's not always that easy. It's a lot more advantageous to just have that box checked going into next season, right?
Right, and there's no guarantee. There are a couple of, I would call them decent prospects in the American Hockey League. Teddy Bluger got called up recently but didn't see a game. Adam Johnson, maybe more of the fleet-footed type of player that you'd expect the Penguins to be producing with the system that Mike Sullivan runs. They're both in the mix, but next year, well, I don't know if there are guarantees at all to play significant minutes for the Penguins. So to pick up a Brassard, that would take care of things for the next year and a half and give those prospects more time to germinate and develop in the minor leagues or on sort of an apprenticeship where they bounce back and forth. We've seen that too with the Penguins. Jake Gensel comes to mind. In fact, last year was up, then was back down, then was up for good after that. So that's exactly why we talk about Brassard, Dan and I, and it's no secret. It's no exclusive thought for us, no doubt about it, at Pittsburgh Hockey Now. It's a really nice fit, and Brassard is still at the back end of his prime at age 30. So there are plenty of things working in his favor.
So tonight is the first, as someone on my Twitter feed mentioned to me, tonight is the first Bucks and Pucks doubleheader of 2018. Pirates starting their first spring training game this afternoon against the Tampa Bay Rays. Matt, you've joined me and Tim Williams at Pirates Prospects for your baseball writing, and you had a column about Neil Huntington today that I thought was pretty interesting. You know, I think that Neil is a very interesting case in that I feel like he says a lot of words publicly that don't have a great deal of meaning, and they're just a lot of words. And what that means is people are left to see in him what they want to see a lot of times. And I did a poll right after the Pirates traded Garrett Cole. I did a poll on Twitter and said, do you trust Neil Huntington to rebuild the Pirates? And 80% of the people that answered my poll, and there were over 500 of them, said no. And that kind of contrasts with what I've gotten to know is a pretty smart guy that I think has a pretty good feel for what he's doing. And I think you kind of hit on that a little bit in your column today.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Neil Huntington has never had any kind of resources to work with, and he rebuilt the team into a playoff contender with help from his staff. I hate to just say that, Jeff, because all the scouts that are under him, the assistant GM, people that he surrounds himself with, those in a lot of cases are just as important, but those are also decisions that a general manager makes to hire these types of people or retain them from previous administration when they take over. So I feel comfortable saying that Huntington is, at very least, baseline competent at his job. He can do the job, and he can make things happen. I didn't expect for the Pirates to end up with Corey Dickerson, but they did yesterday, and they were able to offload a bad contract and an underperforming player in Daniel Hudson in the process. So they had to give, $1 million to the Reds. That's no big deal, even for a team like the Pirates that's very skinflint. But, speaking of skinflint, that's the budget that Huntington has to work with. And we'll never truly know, Alan, exactly where Huntington's shortcomings or where his perhaps hesitance to be more aggressive ends, and where the Pirates' limitations from upstairs, from Bob Nutting, the ownership group, and Frank Coonelly, the team president, and where that begins. So we can't truly analyze it from the outside unless we have some sort of insider information, and none of that has leaked out to anybody over the decade plus that Huntington's been there. But we can assume, based on context clues, that his budget he is told not to take any sort of material risks or any real risks with dollars spent. And if there are dollars out there, that may not contribute to the next Pirates winning team that are signed or committed to players via contracts, then he's under direction to try to move and try to turn them into younger, cheaper assets. And in that way, he's done what he's been told to do. The problem is he's such a good soldier, Alan, and that's what you were hinting at, and that's what you wrote about with your piece on Pirates prospects earlier this week about communication. He tries, but he's not the most forceful speaker. He's not the most clear speaker and communicator, whether it be in public or private, as we're hearing now from players who are coming out and saying they have no idea what the Pirates are doing. So he can afford to improve there, but I believe overall he's at the very least an average general manager in some of the most essential tasks of the job, making trades, quantifying assets, signing free agents when he has the opportunity. On all those, I give him at least a passing grade.
To me, I think the analogy I kind of liken it to is it's like a 100-meter race, and one guy has a weight sled on, and nobody knows how much weight he's got on there. We know that he's not running with the same freedom that everybody else is, but we don't know exactly how much he's weighed down either. And so it makes it very hard to decide, oh, well, 7th place, was that good? I don't know. And so it does. And like you said, he's not the kind of guy that's ever going to enlighten anybody as to his own personal difficulties with attempting to do his job. That's just not the way he operates. So I do think it lends itself to a lot of people that don't like him and that don't have a particularly good reason for not liking him. I just think that it's not, as I wrote, it's not a situation that's conducive to just trust, to say like, oh, that guy's got it. I'm not worried. I don't think that it's ever going to lend itself to that. And I think that's sort of what's manifested itself in the clubhouse a bit, is that the players see the same thing the fans do. Like, hey, he's saying this, he did this, none of this makes any sense. What's going on? And I think that's been a problem for the Pirates, but I don't think I wanted to talk about it a lot because I feel like it's a rare bit of like true candor and insight into the way athletes think. But at the same time, I don't really think what's happened since the Pirates have reported to spring training is that big of a deal going forward for the way this team is going to perform this year. Do you?
No, some guys just had to vent, and I understand why David Freese especially felt like he had to say something, but in the full context of his, 20 minutes he was talking to reporters on the day that he came into Pirate City for the first time this year, he also doubled back on some stuff and some statements that he made. He hedged later. So maybe he just felt like this was his last time to have the bully pulpit and to speak freely or to have that level of a platform in order to express his frustrations. The players are never probably going to understand anything completely. It's their job to focus on their jobs and perform and do the best they can there. But easy for me to say. I think we've all been in situations where we disagree with management or decisions that were made from people with a higher pay grade than us, and it does affect how you go about your job. So there needs to be some level of at least an effort to bridge the gap and to make sure that the players don't think that they're being held in contempt in these ways, because that can have a real destructive effect on what they're trying to do. But also as a player, as a professional, you realize that you're not going to have input over all these things. The Pirates operate in such a way. You know this. When you're drafted by the Pirates, when you're brought in by the Pirates, David Freese signed an extension with the Pirates, so he knew what he was getting into as well in these situations. And I can't speak, Alan, to what Freese and some other players may have said that, or did say that the last couple of years they felt there was maybe a lack of urgency, a lack of accountability, a lack of knowledge on what the grander plan was for the organization. But that's all very easy to say after you lose. If you win, well, I don't know if that was any different in 2013 or 14 or 15 because I wasn't in there, and neither was David Freese. So I take many of his comments along those lines with a grain of salt, and I feel like it was an airing of grievances a couple of months late, and the Pirates can move on from this. And now with Corey Dickerson, adds a couple of wins, I think, to their ledger this year. They're looking more interesting, at least from my perspective.
So, yeah, I think the Dickerson trade is like, can you ever remember any trade of anyone being so universally approved of. I mean, especially for the Pirates, but really anybody. I mean, you look at the numbers, you look at the player that the Pirates are getting, and yeah, I mean, he's some struggles in the second half of the season last year. His defense isn't great in left field, but then the Pirates essentially unloaded a guy that they didn't want and way overpaid for, and a former 13th round draft pick. I mean, that's essentially giving away a net nothing.
They made something out of nothing in this case. Like you just said, Dickerson might have too much swing and miss, 27 home runs last year. That's not what it used to be. If we're assuming that the offensive environment is going to remain the same with more fly balls and more fly balls going over fences across Major League Baseball. But that's more power than they had as of 2 days ago, and it's an asset. An asset and a player that you can plug right into your starting lineup, and you don't have to overextend other players or push a Michael Saunders into a spot that maybe he's not capable of filling on an everyday basis. So, yeah, a real win here for Huntington, and that's what triggered my column this morning on Pirates prospects. Just looking back, yeah, he's made some moves. He's made some moves that have produced value that have maybe not as extreme as this case, though, Alan, in something from nothing. But this does remind that he can still do his job when he does have the opportunity. And it's an even-up swap in terms of salary, too. So, yeah, with Dickerson and with the way it was received, of course, what's not to like? Unless you're one of these people. Well, I had a couple people on social media this morning say, "Well, no one. The Rays are just getting rid of players, and maybe there's something wrong with this guy because the Pirates wanted him." You know how that type of thing goes. It's just you perceive things in the way that fits your narrative if you're a certain type of personality.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing I will say is that it's a really nice trade. When you look at the assets sort of in a vacuum. But I think if you take a look at the bigger picture, right, and you look at the 3 trades the Pirates have made in the last 5 weeks in trading McCutchen, Cole, and Hudson and what they got, and I tweeted out the list on social media yesterday, but it's basically, Dickerson, Moran, Musgrove, Feliz, Crick, and some prospects. But, Are the Pirates fundamentally better than they were January 1st right now? It just feels like they did a lot of running around to save $20 million and end up with basically the same team.
Right. That's the one part that does confuse me about this offseason, and it continues to, because Huntington's called it a retool. I don't really know what that means. It's just another one of those words that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what to do with that. And based on all the moves in cumulative form, as you just laid out there, it does feel like treading water in that way. And they're depending on quite a bit from the young starting staff, rotation I'm talking about, and some of the pitchers in the bullpen too. And they're depending on players to bounce back who they need to bounce back. So much of what we were talking about coming into the 2018 season, I believe you and I talked 2 months ago maybe, about the Pirates and what they were trying to do this offseason and where they could go and if they could compete in 2018. I don't know if I feel terribly different one way or the other. I felt a little bit worse about their chances following the McCutchen trade and also the Cole trade. They were right there in that same week. Now I feel a little bit better, but going back to October, I still feel like 82 wins, 84 wins would be a nice year for this group.
It's funny. My contention all offseason was the most likely outcome for the Pirates was that they were going to do basically nothing and come into spring with the same team they had last year. And they made 3 giant trades and accomplished basically nothing and are coming into the season with essentially the same. I mean, it's not, obviously there's a lot of different parts, but when you start to add them all up, they're right where they left off. So, I mean, I think the interesting thing to me is they've saved, I think, almost $20 million in these 3 trades. Plus, they have a $50 million BAM Tech payment. I can understand not spending that money right now because the Pirates contending, whether they spend it all or not, would require on, like you said, 3 or 4 young pitchers playing well, Starling Marte, Gregory Polanco, and Josh Bell playing, and Colin Moran playing well. And so it's fair to say, hey, let's see what happens. Let's get to June, and then you got to make a move to take on salary at that point. It's fine to do it, but I just feel like they saved a bunch of money, didn't do much else, and now what? I mean, there's still a lot of good players out there in free agency. If they really wanted to make this team into a playoff team, I think $20 million would get them pretty darn close.
Yeah, I think it might. And it's weird to me to look at, I believe Tim Williams at Pirates Prospects, that the opening day payroll is around, $85 million after the trade yesterday. So 85 is really low in the context of MLB this season these days. The Pirates were up over 100 the last 2 years, I think, maybe even the last 3 years. But you wonder where all this is going to go, if there is some sort of a grander plan to put it into use for a free agent next offseason. That would be un-Pirates-like, but that's a lot of money to just leave there on the table, available, and it just makes you question the decision-making from up top. And if there's one thing for Pirates fans to be mad about this offseason, for me it's still the ownership group, and for me it's still Major League Baseball too. So I guess that's two things, but there's the economic system that really isn't a system. It's a free market with a soft cap on top that hurts the team in the Pirate spot in the city of Pittsburgh. And there's also the ownership group that isn't going to operate on the open-closed window that someone like Matt Atanasio in Milwaukee has operated on. And those are two things that can make it quite frustrating to be a Pirates fan in 2018.
So I think we're pretty close to the end here, but I wanted to say I'm excited to have you with us on Pirates Prospects. I'm excited to have you sort of in the family, I guess, at Pittsburgh Hockey Now. I write for Pittsburgh Sports Now, sort of the collegiate side of things, and we've got some other things going on there that I think are pretty exciting coming up. So it's an exciting time. And it's spring, or it's close to spring. It feels like spring in Florida, I'm going to guess. It felt like spring when I was there last week. So let's get some, let's end on a positive and forward-looking note that the Stanley Cup playoffs are just a few weeks away. How about that? Is that a good enough ending for us?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I'm feeling pretty optimistic. It's my third straight year I'm down here in Florida at this time of the year, so you get a jump start on it. I don't take it for granted. And in terms of the hockey playoffs and what's going on, the Penguins have surged to such a degree that we can bank on them, at the very least, being around for another couple of weeks after the end of the regular season. And for back-to-back Cup champions in a cap era, I think that's about as much as you can ask for.
That's Matt Geica. It's his show. I'm Alan Saunders filling in. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. We'll see you next week on Geica's Got Game on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com.